I Know What You Did Last Wednesday, Part 7. I found Eric, Mark, and Brenda in the drawing room. This was one of the most extraordinary rooms in the house, almost like a chapel with a great stained glass window at one end and a high vaulted ceiling. Rory McDougall had obviously fancied himself as a musician. There was even a church organ against the wall, the silver pipes looming over us. Like so many of the other rooms, the walls were lined with old weapons. In here there were antique pistols, muskets, and flintlocks. All in all, we couldn't have chosen a worse house to share with a mass murderer. There were more weapons than you'd find in the Tower of London. I just hoped they weren't as real as they looked. The three survivors were sitting in heavy leather chairs. I stood in front of them with the organ on one side and the row of bookshelves on the other. Everyone was watching me. I felt a bit like Hercule Poirot at the end of one of his cases, explaining it to the suspects. The only trouble was, this wasn't the end of the case. I was still certain that I was talking to the murderer. He or she had to be one of the people in the room. Somewhere outside, a clock chimed the hour. It was 9 o'clock. Night had fallen. 7 of you were invited to Crocodile Island, I began, and I see now that you have something in common. We went to the same school? Interrupted Tim. I know that, Tim, but there's something else. You all got prizes for coming first. You've already told me that Rory was first in maths, Libby was first in geography. What's this got to do with anything? Eric snapped. Don't you see? Libby was the first in geography and someone dropped a globe on her head. Someone told me that Sylvia Binns came first in chemistry and we think she was poisoned. Janet came first in French, Mark murmured, which would explain why she got stabbed by a model of the Eiffel Tower. And Rory McDougall came first in maths. He was stabbed too, Eric said. He was more than stabbed, he was divided. There was a long silence. That's the reason why Johnny Nadler wasn't invited to the island, Brenda said. He never came first in anything. He was second. But that means, Eric had gone pale, I came first in history. I came first in sport, Mark said. Brenda nodded, and I came first in music. We all turned to look at Tim, but he couldn't have come first in anything. Could he? I noticed he was blushing. He licked his lips and looked the other way. What did you come first in, Tim? I asked. I didn't, he began, but I could tell he was lying. We have to know, I said. It could be important. I remember, Brenda began. All right, Tim sighed. I got first prize in needlework. Needlework? I exclaimed. Well, yes, it was a hobby of mine. Just for a bit, I mean. He was going redder and redder. I didn't even want the prize. I just got it. It was for a handkerchief. The idea of my 16-year-old brother winning a prize for an embroidered hanky made my head spin. But this wasn't the time to laugh. Hopefully, I'll be able to do that later. Wait a minute, Eric said. He looked annoyed. Maybe it was because I was 10 years younger than him, and I was the one who worked it out. I came first in history, so you're saying I'm going to be killed historically? But that's what it looks like, I said. But how? I pointed to the wall at the flintlock pistols on the wooden plaques. Maybe someone will use one of those, I said. There are swords, arrows, spears. That bear upstairs is even holding a blunderbuss. This place is full of old weapons. What about me? Brenda whispered. You're not an old weapon, Tim said. I came first in music. Brenda glared at the organ as if it was about to jump off the wall and eat her. But who's doing this? Mark cut in. I mean, it's got to be someone in this room, right? We know there's nobody else on the island. There can't be anyone hiding. We've searched everywhere. It's him, Eric pointed at Eric. He never forgave us for throwing him in the canal. This is his revenge. What about you? Eric returned. You once said you were going to kill us all. It was in the schoolyard. I remember it clearly. That's true, Mark said. You used to bully me all the time, Brenda wailed, just because I had pigtails and crooked teeth. And you were fat, Tim reminded her. But I didn't mean it when I said that, she turned to Mark. You said you were going to kill Tim when he broke all your fingers with that conker. I only broke 3 of them, Tim interrupted. I didn't much like Tim, Mark agreed. And you're right, I would have quite happily strangled him. Not that it would have been easy with 3 broken fingers. But I never had any argument with you, or Eric, or any of the others. So why would I want to kill you? It's still got to be one of us, Eric insisted. He paused. It can't be Tim, he went on. Why not? Tim asked. Because this whole business is the work of a fiendish madman, and you're not fiendish, you're just silly. Oh, thanks. Tim looked away. I know it's not me, Brenda went on. That's what you say, I know it's not me, Eric went on. That's what you say, Brenda sniffed. I know it's not me, so it's got to be Brenda or Mark. What about Sylvie? Tim suggested. She's already dead, Tim, I reminded him, quietly. Oh, yes. This is all irrelevant, Mark said. The question is, what are we going to do? We could be stuck on this island for days, or even weeks. It all depends on when Captain Randall comes back, and by then it could be too late. I'd like to make a suggestion, I said. Everyone stopped and looked at me. The first thing is, we all got to keep each other in sight. The kid's right, Mark agreed. So long as we can see each other, we're going to be safe. That's true, Tim exclaimed. All we have to do is keep our eyes open and everything will be fine. He turned to me. You're brilliant, Nick. For a moment, I was getting really worried. All the lights went out. It happened so suddenly that for a moment, I thought it was just me, that I'd been knocked out or something, or somehow closed my eyes without noticing. The last thing I saw was the four of them, Eric, Brenda, Mark and Tim, sitting in their chairs as if caught in a photograph. Then everything was black. There was no moon that night, and even if there had been stained glass window, there was no moon that night, and even if there had been the stained glass window, would have kept most of the light out. Darkness came crashing onto us. It was total. Don't panic, Eric said. There was a gunshot. I saw it, a spark of red on the other side of the room. Tim screamed. For a horrible moment, I wondered if he'd been shot. I forced myself to calm down. He'd come first in needlework. Nobody would be aiming a gun at him. Tim, I called out. Can I panic now? He called back. Eric. That was Mark's voice. And then there was some sort of groaning sound, followed by a heavy thud. At the same time, I heard the door open and close. I stood up, trying to see through the darkness, but it was hopeless. I couldn't even make out my own hand in front of my face. Tim, I called again. Nick. I was relieved to hear his voice. Eric, I tried. Silence. Brenda. Nothing. Mark? The lights came back on. There were only two people alive in the room. I was standing in front of my chair. One more step and I'd put my foot through the coffee table. Tim was under the coffee table. He must have crawled there when the lights went out. Eric was on the floor. He had been shot. There was a flintlock pistol, still smoking, lying on the carpet on the other side of the room. It must have been taken off the wall and fired, then dropped. At least that's what it looked like. Brenda was sitting in her chair. She was dead too. One of the organ pipes, the largest, had been pulled down on top of her. That must have been the thud I heard. Brenda had sung her last opera. The only music she needed now was a hymn. There was no sign of Mark. Are you all right, Tim? I demanded. Yes. Tim sounded surprised. I haven't been murdered, he exclaimed. I noticed. I waited a while he climbed out from underneath the coffee table. At least we know who the killer is, I said. Do we? It's got to be Mark, I said. Mark Tyler. I always knew it was him, Tim said. Call it intuition, call it experience, but I knew he was the killer even before he'd done any killing. I don't know, Tim, I said. It bothered me because, to be honest, Mark was the last person I would have suspected. And yet, at the same time, I had to admit, it would have taken a fast mover to push the globe off the roof and to make it all the way downstairs in time. And Mark was the fastest person on the island. Where do you think he went? Tim asked. I don't know. We left the room carefully. In fact, Tim made me leave first. The fact was that, unless I'd got the whole thing wrong, it was just the three of us on the island now. Mark could be waiting for us anywhere. Or waiting for Tim, rather. He had no quarrel with me. That made me think. Tim had come first in needlework, following the pattern of the other deaths. That meant he would probably be killed with some sort of needle. But what would that mean? A sewing needle dipped in poison? A hypodermic syringe? Tim must have had the same thought. He was looking everywhere, afraid to touch anything, afraid even to take another step. We went out into the hall. The fire had died down, and was glowing red. The front door was open. Maybe he went outside, Tim said. What would be the point? I asked. Tim shuddered. Don't talk about points, he said. We went outside, and that was where we found Mark. He had come first in sport, but now he had reached the finishing line. Somebody had been throwing the javelin, and they'd thrown it at him. They had hit it straight in the chest. He was lying on the grass, doing a good impersonation of a sausage on a stick. It's... Tim couldn't finish his sentence. Yeah, I said, it's Mark. There was a few leaves scattered around his body. That puzzled me. The nearest trees were 10 meters away. But this wasn't the time to play the detective. There were no more suspects, and only one more victim. I looked at Tim. Tim looked at me. We were the only two left.